Hi, aloha. My name is Susan Douglas, and I'm the founder of the Maui Clean Air Coalition. And I have my little audience here who might be asking me questions, but I'm going to give you a little background first on the cane burning issue on Maui, which actually started in the 60s, the anti-open air cane burning issue that I know of, because there were a series of groups, usually about one a decade, that took up the banner to find a way to get HC&S, which is a subsidiary of A&B, which is the largest corporation in the state of Hawaii. HC&S is Hawaiian Commercial and Sugar, which is the company that owns 37,000 acres of fields that grow sugarcane and burn 34,000 of that outdoors, and 3,000 acres of the 37,000 are green harvested, meaning that they cut down the cane in the fields and truck the cane to the plant in Pu'unene. We used to have, HC&S used to have two plants, one in Paia, which shut down a number of years ago, and now it still has the one in Pu'unene. We used to have a third one owned by another company up in Lahaina, but that has shut down too. So we have one plant on Maui that burns all of the sugarcane, which has to be burned in order to process it and get ready for it to be made into commercial sugar. So green harvesting is what we have been asking for many years, meaning that they do not burn the sugar in the fields in the open air, so that all of those toxins and particulate matter go into the air and the water and the land and the lungs of all the living beings, but burn it internally in the plant. And right now there's 3,000 acres that are green harvested, but to this point HC&S has refused to do that, and they always say that it's a question of money. Even when other people are willing to put up the money, they've always used that as an excuse. And people always ask, well, why is that? And I tend to think, one, they're just intransigent in their unwillingness to change. And two, you never know before you get into changing something really what the costs are going to be, and they've been unwilling to spend any money on anything up until now. So, and the reason for that, I believe, is because right now with the land in agricultural zoning, they only have to pay about $1 a year per acre in taxes, which means that they don't really have to make any money on the sugar itself. In fact, a lot of years they're operating in the red. But as long as they can hold on to the land and hold on to the water rights and keep the taxes low, that means that when they can and when they're able, given a lot of other conditions, to flip that land into either commercial or residential usage, to build big shopping centers or build home developments, then they can make a lot more money on that land. So in the meantime, they basically do what's the easiest and the cheapest thing to do, which is just keep doing what they've been doing for 100, 150 years. And a lot of people have suggested, well, why not grow other things? And they've suggested everything from hemp to other crops, which HC&S has actually spent a lot of time investigating and researching, and they have a whole department on that. I don't know what's the current level of their research right now. And then I recently heard that they were given a grant, I think it was a $4 million grant not too long ago, to research ethanol. Now, in 1997, the way I got involved, I moved here from California in 1983. And what HC&S does is that they grow the cane 12 months a year. It's 2-year cane, so it takes 2 years to mature. And after they burn a field, they plant new cane. And they have PVC pipe that they put underneath the soil about 6 months, about 6 inches, in order to help with the watering of it. And then they plant the new crop, and they cover the land with black plastic, polyethylene, I believe it is, covering to keep the dust down and to help to keep the water in. So when the crops are mature, when they've hit about 2 years old, they'll pick certain fields and they burn them. And they burn about 10.5 months out of 12, and they burn on an average of 3 to 4 burns per day, except usually they take Sunday off.
Per week? Is it per week or per day?
Per day. And each burn puts about 300 to 400 tons of particulate matter in the air. So that's 1,200 tons of particulate matter per day, 10.5 months out of 12 a year. They usually shut the plant down for repairs and renovation from mid-December or close to Christmas to about February sometime. So how I got started with this whole thing is that in 1997, it was a combination bad fog and cane burning day. Now, for those of you who don't know what fog is, it's called volcanic ash or volcanic fog from the Big Island from the volcanoes going off, which is a high sulfur content in the air, and it's very hazy. When we have Kona winds, meaning when the winds shift directions from their usual pattern and are coming from the south and bring that fog around through Kona of the Big Island and to Maui, then we have a bad fog day, and a lot of people are affected. We have a high rate of asthma. The kids are usually affected the worst. The pharmacists who keep track of the antihistamine sales on days like that will tell you that they skyrocket. The hospitals will notice an increase of people checking in and so on. Well, they will tell you the same thing on bad cane burning days. And when you combine the two, when you have a bad cane burning and bad fog day, it's particularly hard to breathe. And what happened was one day we had a day like that, and we get what's called black snow or black rain, where you can actually see the burnt cane ash falling down all over. The pool lovers love to have to go out and clean their pools and their patios, and the hotels were very upset, and the condo owners, and so not only property damage and expense, but also people getting very sick with headaches and red eyes and scratchy throats or sore throats, fatigue, coughing, sneezing, mucus, all that sort of thing. Anyway, so we had this really bad combination, 3 hours straight of bad fog and cane, and I got deathly ill. And I'm a holistic health consultant, and I could not heal myself. I tried everything I knew. I engaged every holistic healer on the island to help me find a natural remedy for this. And also just to find if there was something more going on, to get a diagnosis. Well, finally, a couple of doctors told me that I actually had acute mononucleosis, that my liver had been toxified so heavily that it was not able to throw all those poisons out. It took me 3 months of barely surviving with no energy until I got myself over to Kauai, where, by the way, the cane burning has ended over there, fortunately, and found a naturopathic doctor who ordered a no-sode, it's called. It's a remedy from Germany, specifically for mononucleosis, and ordered it, and within 3 days of getting it, I was back. I was fine. So at that point, I decided, well, gee, if I'm going to get this sick and not be able to live on Maui, then I might have to move to Kauai or someplace else. So I went to Kauai and I went looking for my spot, and I could never find it. Maui was drawing me back. So then I decided, all right, well, if I'm going to live on Maui, then I'm going to have to do something about the cane burning. And that's how I got involved. And what I did was I just put a simple little free ad in the Maui Bulletin, 35 words. It said something like, I'm getting symptoms from cane burning. Is anybody else having a problem with this? Would you like to come to a meeting at the Lapoa Kihei Elementary School? Here's the date and the time. Or maybe I didn't put all that in the first ad. Maybe I just put my phone number. But anyway, 35 people called. And so I arranged for the elementary school to let us use their cafeteria for free. And 35 people came to the first meeting. And we organized ourselves into committees and started researching what we could do about it. And people basically came out of the woodwork. We held meetings weekly all over the island for a year and a half straight. We met with the company, we met with all of the leaders of the previous groups who had taken on this issue. We had an anonymous donor who gave us $10,000, half of which we used to hire a professional videographer to shoot a Betacam at the time. That was the film that was used of the actual burns. And the other half to put on this big meeting where we invited the regional EPA representative from San Francisco to come and speak to all of us. And there were 350 people that came to that meeting, also in same place, I think, Kihei Lapoa Elementary. And HC&S actually bussed in 50 workers, and we had microphones, we had speakers, we had doctors speaking, we had pharmacists speaking. We had people, about 50 people got up and testified how the cane burning was affecting either their health or their property. And the workers that were bussed in testified how if you guys put up a stink, basically, we're going to lose our jobs, and how afraid of that they were. And but the vice president of A&B came over from Oahu for it, and we got the whole thing on videotape and still have it. So I'm going to take a step back and fill you in with some details, a little bit more history, and that's that in 1961 there was a new head of the Department of Health who declared that open-air cane burning was unhealthy and gave HC&S and A&B 2 years to end the practice. And 2 years later, that person was no longer the head of the Department of Health. And from what I can gather, ever since then, whoever has been the head of the Department of Health or the local office representative have basically done nothing to enforce that initial call or to initiate anything new about that. And they've been turning their backs. And what the EPA said at that meeting was that that their laws as of that time, 97, 98, only covered point source pollution, meaning pollution coming out of the smokestacks at the plant. They didn't even cover the open field cane burning. And so basically, every time we tried to go to an authority, they would kind of pass the buck from one to the other. And what the EPA representative told us, not at the meeting but behind the scenes, was to keep up with what we were doing. That is, create a grassroots movement to put pressure on the company to change their practice, because ultimately that was what was going to work. And it kind of brought us back to the Margaret Mead statement about, I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it only takes one person to stand up and make a difference, and that's the only thing that ever really has made a difference. So we started organizing around that principle, that coming together we would, form a mastermind group and try to figure out how to approach this. Well, one of the first things we did was we went to the people who were living still at the time, who I believe still are, some of whom are still here, of the previous groups, to find out what they had done so that we didn't reinvent the wheel. And the previous group to ours was led by a man named Herb Squires, who no longer lives on Maui. But for a year, what he did was he held, I believe there were weekly meetings, with all of the key people who were involved in the potential decision-making process. And they were held at the plant in Pu'unene, and it included the heads of HC&S, Maui County Council, MECO, Maui Electric Company, ILWU, the Workers' Union, and I can't remember, American Lung Association, I believe, had representatives there, and I'm not sure who else. But basically they spent a year brainstorming, trying to figure out what the solution was. And finally what they came up with was the engineers at HC&S drew up blueprints for what they called the stripper, which was a machine that at that time they estimated would cost $2 million, where they would do green harvesting, they would cut the cane in the fields and truck it to the plant and burn it internally in I think they were going to build like this adjacent building or adjacent sort of plant or adjacent, I don't even know what it's called, but basically it was a place where they could burn the cane, and it would go up through the smokestack, and the smokestack would capture, it would strip the leaves, that's what the machine would do, it would strip the leaves off of the cane in the plant so they didn't have to be burned in the field, and then it would protect the smoke going out of the smokestack, so that all of the toxins were captured internally, and all you would or are supposed to see, according to EPA regulations, is white smoke coming out of the top. Well, we know now that we see dark smoke coming out of the top all the time, and it's often after 5 o'clock, after the Department of Health local guy goes home, but not always. I mean, that's how lax they've been in enforcing that. They're supposed to be charged huge fines if the smoke actually escapes black. And back at that time, the company had spent about $2 million to put in new filters on the top of their stacks, which I haven't heard them doing that since. At any rate, they came up with a solution called the stripper, which everybody agreed on because it was a win-win-win-win-win for everybody, including the workers, meaning that the company, instead of firing people because you think they're doing less work outside and by burning it internally. Actually, they had to hire more workers, and because they had to hire more trucks to actually cut the cane in the field and truck it to the plant. So everybody was happy. Plus the company was then, MECO was ready to buy the extra electricity. They're already buying, I think it's 8 to 10% of 8 to 11 or 12%, something like that, of the electricity that Maui currently uses is actually sold from HC&S to MECO, and they provide that percentage of our electricity now. Well, if they burned the cane internally, they'd be able to sell more electricity to MECO, which they were happy about, and they were happy to pay for it. So everybody was happy, and then HC&S said, however, we're not willing to put up a dime to build the stripper. And so they threw it back on Herb and the local community people to raise the $2 million, which they attempted to do for a while, applying for grants and different things. And for whatever reason, I'm not even sure why, but they couldn't do it, and their group fell apart, and the whole thing died down for another amount of time until we took up the banner. So one of the things that we did when Maui Clean Air, MCAC it was called, was formed, was we divided ourselves into committees, and we started, different people were interested in approaching the whole issue from different areas. Some people wanted to get the subsidies to support the sugar reversed. First we had to come up with a basic mission statement where we could all agree on what we were trying to do, because some people wanted to shut down sugar altogether and plant the land in vegetables, say, or hemp, or something, or grow it or have the sugar used for ethanol, or other things that could be done beyond what was the initial spark of indignation, which was just the fact that they were burning the cane outside. And so we came to the bottom line agreement that we would organize around banning the burn, that our issue was to simply stop the open air cane burning, that it was fine with us if they wanted to continue to burn it internally. It was fine with us if they wanted to continue to grow sugar. They could use it for other things if they wanted to, but that was not our issue. We might get to that issue down the road, but that wasn't it at the time. So the question was then how to put pressure on A&B and HC&S to burn internally. And one committee was formed that wanted to see if they could get the subsidies revoked that support the price increase for sugar. Another group wanted to approach lawyers to see if there was, what the laws were concerning outdoor burning, because certainly in other places you can't even have a fire in your fireplace, or outdoor barbecues at certain times of the year are different altogether. I don't know what the rules are of the states, but all of that was looked at. So we wanted to approach it from a legal aspect. Another group wanted to approach it from a media perspective. That is, let's see what we can't do to do a documentary, maybe like an 8-minute, write up a script, have it use the footage to present the case, basically. There's trouble in paradise, and send it to the major television news magazines like 2020, 60 Minutes, Dateline, etc., and try to interest them in coming out and doing their own reporting as a way of internationalizing the awareness, because this is, you know, the center of the universe here. We do get international cream of the crop tourists. People wanted to affect tourism and see if the effect, if we could reduce tourism or get enough tourists speaking out about it, that maybe that would put pressure on them. In other words, using the media to embarrass or shame the company. I'm trying to remember all of the different angles that we approached it from, but I think I remember there being at least 20, if not 35. There was just a lot of different ways that people approached how to go about this. And we looked at everything from petition drives, which were done back in, I think, the 60s or 70s. I remember way back then. Somebody told us that within a week, they wrote up a simple petition, and within a week 5,000 people had signed onto the petition voicing their opposition to the open-air cane burning. Don't know where that went or why it didn't go any further, but what I discovered about all of the different approaches that had been taken in the past, what I concluded, that is, was that every time that people got close to making a impression or got the company's attention, or the company started getting a little worried about the community pressure that was building up, they would say something, and I have copies of all of the headlines and all of the newspaper articles and all the interviews with all of the heads of the company, where they would say, they'd throw out a little bone, you know, and indicate that within 2 years we expect to have a different approach, whether it be using the sugar for ethanol biofuel, which sugar does happen to be the best, or if not one of the best sources of ethanol production. Or we've been working on researching other crops that we can grow. We're very close to finding that out. Whatever it is, the fiber board, at one point they actually, I believe, put money into trying to develop a fiber board production company where they were going to use the biomass, that is the matter that was not burned, that's high in fiber, to be pressed into pressed board and like lumber and building materials, and could be used for furniture, things like that. And they found they said that wasn't lucrative, but the point is that people believed them, and so they stopped organizing, and they all dissipated and they went their separate ways. And that's been a challenge with organizations that have a lot, other volunteer community organizations that have a lot of other things on their plate. There have been water issues. Another reason that the company gave was that we don't know if we're going to be able, they used to have, like, I think it was 30-year water leases, and in the last 5 or 10 years there's been fighting over the water rights, and so they weren't sure how long of a water lease they were going to be able to get, and they weren't willing to put money into revamping the plant if they didn't know where their water was going to be coming from long term. They didn't want to spend, millions and millions of dollars on setting up a new system if they were going to lose their water rights. I mean, it's always something. They always have a reason or an excuse or something a bone that they can throw to give people hope, and a reason to stop putting the pressure on. So that's kind of been the story over the years. I remember the person who organized the group before Herb, who I believe is still here on Maui. Her name was Susan Jensen, and she went around actually interviewing people who were extremely ill. She did this on videotape. Extremely ill or dying. And we've had people over the years who swore that they, well, before they died, they swore that they were going to die as a result of the cane burning. And one of the problems that we found, that was another angle that we approached it from the medical, was how do we get one, get the money to put up a big enough, to pay for a big enough study to show the health effects. And the company always swore that it had the money to pay for lawyers in court to prove that there was no direct correlation between breathing the smoke-filled, not just the smoke-filled air, but the list of toxins that Susan Jensen's group, this long list of toxins that was found in the smoke, to prove the linkage between that and the illness. There was a whole other approach which had to do with putting up or updating the measuring devices around the island that measure the level of haze or fog or cane burning in the air, and when it's above a certain level, they're not supposed to burn, or they're not supposed to, or they're supposed to stop the burns. And a lot of those were not good anymore. They needed to be upgraded, and it always seemed to come down for us to a question of money and also leadership. That over a year and a half or so of us meeting, we came down to we had a core committee of about 9-10 people who were the most active, and we would continue to hold these weekly meetings, but it got to a place where we were all volunteering, and we were all listening to everybody's heartfelt stories so much that it became very heavy for us, and none of us were getting paid, and a lot of us were doing it while working 1 or 2 other jobs, and it was very taxing. And then for me personally, what happened, the reason that the group went inactive was that in mid-1998 I heard about the whole Y2K issue and how the computers in the year 2000 might have this problem with the zeros and the ones, and how we might be facing worldwide calamity and no shipments of food to Maui, and no coal to run the electric pumps to bring the water to different parts of Maui, and all of a sudden it became a bigger issue for me of getting the island self-sufficient. So I actually stopped leading MCAC, hoping that others would take up the call, but they didn't. And I became the Y2K organizer for the next year and a half until the whole millennium shift changed and we were okay. But we did get a lot done. Again, it was weekly meetings for the next year and a half, and people were learning how to plant sustainable gardens, and we got big pipes shipped over from Molokai to upcountry so that we would have another second water source for Maui Meadows in case the electrical system went down, and we did all kinds of really good things to get Maui more sustainable. But between 1998, when we stopped, and now, oh, one more point, and that was that at the end of that, at the end of 2000, I had now been doing this major community organizing for 3 years straight, and I was burned out. So I took the next number of years off to just kind of rejuvenate myself. But all of this time since then, you know, the people are still here, the complaints are still loud and clear. People call me or write me or see our website all the time and want to know what they can do. And I have been telling people, I've been holding the vision that we just need some new leaders to step forward and basically to do the same thing I did, put a small ad in the paper, call for a meeting, see who shows up, and divide into committees and see how far you can get this time. And I'm happy to consult, I'm happy to support, but I don't want to be the sole, or at least initial, leader, or sole leader anymore. So one of the things that our group did was that we wrote up a long questionnaire that we called a testimonial form, and we circulated it all over the island, and we asked people, it was quite lengthy actually, asking people to document for us how the cane burning had affected them. And I remember we collected at least 100 of these that we then used to approach a number of different lawyers, everywhere from the Aaron Brockovich firm in LA to Americans with Disability Act lawyers on Oahu, looking for a good lawyer who was willing to work pro bono for us. And we did wind up getting one on Oahu, and actually Aaron Brockovich's firm is still interested in helping us. We also approached the Sierra Club in our DC, I think it's called National Resource Defense Council. Can't even remember all the names of the different groups that we approached, but I remember the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. They definitely wanted to take up our case because they said that people with disabilities are not able to leave their homes during a burn. And at one point the company actually paid for buses to pick up disabled people and take them from their homes to areas that were not in the direct, wind path or flow of the burns. But I think they quickly realized that that was admitting their culpability, and so they stopped doing that. So the ADA was very interested, and we worked with them for at least 6 months, getting them all the documentation we could, and they put as many of their lawyers on it as had the time, because they too were busy and it was hard for them to work pro bono. But eventually they couldn't go any further. I think they said they were too busy. And but basically what that led to was our group with looking at all these different aspects, concluding that for us, the two angles that we wanted to pursue that felt had the most bang for the buck was the legal aspect and the media blitz. And so we simultaneously started writing up the script for the documentary and looking at the laws and possibly even a referendum. What kind of initiative or referendum could we get on the Maui ballot that would not only inform people on the island about the issue, but and open up the talking points, but also hopefully get passed and go into law and give the county council support in regulating the company. So that was kind of where we left off on that, and while we were doing all that, we continued to meet with the company and keep them informed of what we were doing and get their input, and they would tell us things like they were sending representatives or had sent representatives to all of the different countries in the world that had stopped their open-air cane burning with one solution or another. They had sent people to Brazil to meet with the companies there. They had sent people to Australia. They had sent people to Florida and to Georgia and other states that had previously done open-air cane burning to look at their solutions. And what they had concluded was that most of those places grew one-year cane that was much easier to cut in the fields, and that the terrain of those countries was flat, that here we were on volcanic land that was on an angle and it was bumpy. And it was hard for them to, that there weren't any harvesters available, basically, that could cut the two-year cane on our terrain. Well, of course, they weren't willing to put the money into developing that kind of a harvester, but that was beside the point. So anyway, we just did our best for the time allotted that we had, and during that time, we certainly raised the awareness of people, and, some people had to leave the island because they couldn't stay for their own health reasons. We actually did have hotel and condo owners involved that wanted to support the movement. A lot of people got there was another movement that began to pressure the company to pay for air filters and air conditioners and fans and things so that people could close up their homes and stay inside. On those hot, boggy and smoggy and burning days for anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 hours until the trade winds would make the smoke pass. We had a lot of different things that were attempted. We had one 14-year-old girl who was very active in the group, who was organizing her, I think it was a junior high school in Wailuku at the time, and her neighborhood in Wailuku, and they were greatly affected by the burning also. Not just Kihei, it was all over the island. It was all the way up to Kula and Pukalani. We had people doing soil sampling because all of that dust was coming in from the fields that had just been burned, and they felt like they were getting poisoned just by breathing the air of the dust that was falling in their homes. There was a lot of work done, and all of that can be picked up again and move forward. And at the time I felt like I was willing to die for the issue anyway, because I was dying anyway, and I just God was telling me you're not to leave Maui, so I felt like, well, I got to do something. So it was, a lot of people were that passionate about it. They felt that it was their calling to take this on. However, there is a certain skill set involved with community organizing, and there's certainly a very high level of commitment and finding that balance between impatience and patience, and patience and perseverance, and courage and assertiveness, and a lot of different qualities that people have to develop in themselves, or call upon if they're already developed in themselves. And teamwork. I mean, it was a fabulous experience, frankly. We all learned so much about ourselves and about the island and about working with each other, and I highly encourage others to step forward and take on this issue until it's complete, until we're complete. And now there's, we had everything from revolutionaries wanting to burn down the plant, set the whole thing on fire, to, we had to try to keep, calm, and people who were writing songs and songs of protest and posting them all over the web. And we had people who wanted to, just find investors to put the money up to buy HC&S or buy A and B if there was enough money, or what, we came up with a million different solutions. Some of the doctors were afraid because of just, the general fear of either pressure from locals or losing their business or whatever.
About a year ago, I tried running an ad in the local Maui news. I took a photograph of a smokestack just bellowing out smoke. And the caption was, "Smoking is bad for our health." And the Maui news said, "You can't run this. We're liable unless you sign this agreement that you solely are liable for running this ad." So what I'm thinking, do you think the community as a whole is under that kind of threat from mandate? Cannot create any waves about the burn?
Well, I think that the threat is greater than the threat. You know what I mean?
You mean there's no teeth in it?
Well, let's just say nobody's been killed yet, and every group in the last 50 years has been threatened. And I think that the threat is probably less now because there's more people. There's less of the old-timers who are so believing in the plantation way of life and that this was our heritage and so on, that there are more people that are more environmentally conscious now, who understand that smoke itself, whether it has any toxins in it or not, just the particulate matter from burning wood, healthy wood, is bad for your lungs, I mean, people...
Not only that, but now people are aware of global warming.
That too.
The latest issue. I mean, wouldn't that have even more of an impact?
Right, and therefore, and so as a result, there may be funds available for, I mean, that was our big hope when Obama came in, was that, we would be able to change the EPA regulations, or we would be able to get funds for green projects or something.
Well, I was telling somebody, this would not happen in California. If Kahului, say, was like Oakland, where you had cane burning going on that close to a urban center, it just wouldn't happen.
Right. People wouldn't allow it.
Why is it allowed here and not on the mainland?
Because we need leadership. We need people to organize. There are a lot of people who are very upset about it, but they need leaders to stand up and say, "Follow me," basically.
Okay.
And let's do this.
Any politicians currently that would support that kind of issue?
I think if there was enough of a swell from the community, we could get Arakawa to do something, because he hired Rob Parsons as the head of the environmental department, and Rob has been involved in the movements from the beginning.
You told me about Rob Parsons.
Yeah.
I got the same day.
And I'm not sure about who else on the county council right
Allie Cochran, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as far as you know, Susan, the companies never admitted that they're not creating a health hazard.
Right.
And yet at the same time, they're advising people to shut their windows and close their doors when they're burning.
For about 5 minutes and then they stop, because that was admitting.
So it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there is a hotline you can call and get on to be notified because they
Yeah.
know that it's not
Yeah.
healthy. And
But I mean, at the same time, the statements
Yeah.
not affecting your health, but shut your windows and close your doors.
right, and what we did from the legal aspect is we looked at how to create a lawsuit, either an individual or a class action lawsuit.
And for that, you have to get all these
Either
people
for
that have
health
been
or for
affected.
property reasons.
Uh-huh.
And then again, that came down to leadership. We never could find a lawyer who was willing to. It was a combination of us losing our momentum and not following through with the legal leads that we had, and the lawyers. We had lawyers that were willing to do it pro bono, but you know, by that time it was towards the end of our movement, and so we kind of weren't able to follow through.
Right.
But I still have the names of those people too.
Okay. You don't have a copy of the petition that was circulated
I don't. That was before my time.
before you were trying to get it on the ballot?
No, the petition drive went a couple of groups before ours, like probably in the 60s
But
or
did-
70s.
But a petition to try and get this on the ballot? Do you have any?
Well, I think the way to do that, again, is to call the Office of Elections and find out what the procedure is for getting a referendum.
You know, I did that, and they shifted me to another office, and they said, we don't handle that kind of thing.
Perseverance. Yeah,
You
it
know,
can
we-
be done.
You know,
I can
I mean,
help you push
we
through
can
that
help
one.
you if you want to run for mayor, but we don't have a department for this.
You know, that we have had people get signatures to get a referendum on the ballot. We did medical marijuana not too long
Oh, yeah,
ago.
because I was trying to get a date, like when we would have to get it
Right,
on there
right.
before the
We need to
2012
find
election.
that out soon.
Yeah. So you're willing to help out to keep going on
I'm
this?
happy
I
to
know you got-
support anybody who wants to take leadership on this.
I really want to get this thing going.
Cool, great.
Yeah, I think it's time. I think the timing is important, along with, I'm hearing of all the damage on the reefs outside of McKenna, and more health problems, and more global warming, and who am we talking to? That Hawaiian health,
Kapuna?
yeah, Kapuna, yeah,
About.
this whole burn
Oh,
issue.
yeah.
Right, how it was affecting him, and how he would be happy to tell all his friends and relatives,
Right.
to sign this petition.
That was another thing that we ran across. The Hawaiians came out of the closet on a one-to-one basis with us, but they didn't really want to be seen at the meetings, and they didn't want to be public because of all of the familial pressure.
Yeah.
And so,
Family.
right,
Well, no family.
right. But they would come out and tell us, how they were sure that their father or grandfather had died of lung cancer as a result of working in the fields every day or whatever.
What do you think about? I don't know. Maybe I'm sure you.
Oh, and it was because they were again afraid. They were buying into this whole myth that if they lose the 850 job, in other words, if we stop open air cane burning, this was the company's line, that the company would have to shut down the plant. They would go out of business, and therefore have to lay off the 800 or whatever it is now, 700 workers. And so that's how the company instilled fear in the local community. And so it's time for us, I think, to combat that perspective with, even if, at the worst
There's
case,
another way to harvest this stuff.
that too, but even if the worst case scenario happened and they had to shut down, and that was the other reason they said, was that the fields would turn to dust, and all of the rats would overflow the island and so on. First of all, we're not calling for anything like that. We love our green fields, and there's also plenty of other things that can restore the soil and plant and give us new life and so on. But there's job training. There are new green jobs to be created, and we can be creating solar panels, and we can be doing other things. But that's so far removed from what we're even suggesting at this point. We're just suggesting that we green harvest, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot to tell you about the Tilby Corporation.
You don't have any more to
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
I'm
is.
running.
She has been the whole time.
Okay.
And so, so another thing that happened during our time was the Tilby Corporation contacted us out of Canada. And I think they're still going. It was a company that was actually building plants by sugar fields that would take the cane, green harvest it, turn it into particle board and ethanol. And they were actually willing to come and build a whole new plant right next to the Pu'unene plant, pay for it themselves, if the company agreed, and the county agreed, to buy the ethanol in the government fleets. And we figured that once that got going, that it would extend throughout the state, so that all of the government fleets would be running on ethanol, and then it would probably spread from there to the other cars. But they were going to pay for this multi-million-dollar construction project themselves.
Wow.
And HC&S said no, they would not agree to it and would not give us a reason. So that's how far the company will go to even go against its own reasoning about, we're not willing to spend a dime for this project.
Right. Now, I heard that they were not subsidized. Is that true?
No, they are subsidized.
They are subsidized.
Sugar in the U.S. is.
Okay.
And then,
Which is also a big thing that's being discussed in Washington right now, so to get rid of, the tax loopholes and the subsidies.
Right.
So that could be another movement that could possibly gain national support right now.
And did you find out actually what head of what department would be responsible for making a decision to stop the burn?
Probably the head of A&B.
So the president, there's a board
Well,
of
the
directors.
head of HC&S, his influence on the decision-making process is great. And, whatever he recommends, A&B will probably go along with. However, he will always pass the buck to A&B and say that, he doesn't have decision-making power because A&B they're just a subsidiary of A&B.
Right.
And there is a new head of HC&S now. It's not the person who was the head then.
is that a good thing? Or?
I don't know him.
Okay, so what do you think is the general direction right now?
But it takes somebody with heart, or some buddies with heart, to really stand up and go forward and lead the way. And that's the only thing that I see that is lacking right now. There are plenty of people who are happy to support. And what we need is just more leadership, as is being called on nationally, by the way. So we're just a microcosm of the macrocosm here, and now we know Ka'oi, so let's lead the way. Thank you. Mahalo and aloha.